Fathers often have a strange habit. We keep track of time not through calendars, but through the backs of our children as they leave. 10 years ago, at the dilapidated bus stop in the suburbs, I stood there watching Lucas, my second son, step onto the bus heading west. The boy back then only had a worn-out canvas bag, a few dozen dollars hastily stuffed in his jacket pocket, and blazing eyes that refused to surrender to poverty. When Lucas turned around, hesitating as if wanting to stay to shoulder this family drowning in debt, I placed my hands, calloused from carpentry, on his shoulders and gently pushed him. "Go on, my son. Go and build something better. Your mother and I have your brothers Marcus and Simon to take care of things at home." I promised we would be fine. Lucas also promised to return. Both men told the truth that day. It was just that no one knew how ruthlessly time and greed could distort the truth. A few years after he left, Lucas's efforts began to bear fruit. From a hired construction worker, eating boxed lunches in the freezing snow, he started landing small contracting deals, eventually rising to become the owner of a construction company. The first checks sent home brought immense pride to Martha and me. Every time I saw an envelope with Lucas's name on it, I would smile and proudly boast to my old friends in the neighborhood that my son had finally escaped the vicious cycle of this poor town. But right at that moment, venom began to seep into my family, so silently and smoothly that I didn't even notice. It was a Sunday afternoon. Marcus, the eldest son who always wore neat suits and carried the demeanor of a knowledgeable man, walked into the house with a stack of documents in his hand. Marcus poured me a cup of hot tea, sat down at the old dining table I had built myself, and cleared his throat with a deep, reassuring tone. "Dad," Marcus began, his eyes full of sincerity, "Lucas is doing quite well lately, sending money to you and Mom every month, and I'm very happy about that, but you see, the world is complicated now. Banks have all gone digital, and taxes are a mess. You and Mom are getting older, your eyesight is failing, and trudging to the bank to cash every check is both dangerous and makes you easy targets for online scammers." I nodded. Marcus was right. A carpenter who had spent his whole life, accustomed to squares and chainsaws like me, always felt suffocated by the blinking banking apps on a smartphone. Marcus pushed the paper toward me, tapping his finger on it. "I've consulted a lawyer. We should set up a family trust, or at the very least, you can sign a financial power of attorney over to me. I will step in to receive Lucas's money on your behalf, manage the accounts, and pay your monthly medical, electric, and water bills. You and Mom just need to rest." Martha, my wife, sounded hesitant, calling out from the kitchen, "But the money is sent by him. If we just let you manage it, will Lucas overthink it?" Marcus chuckled softly, the tolerant smile of an eldest brother. "Mom, Lucas is running a huge company. He has to stress over hundreds of employees' materials and contracts. We are family. We must help him shoulder the trivial matters. Should you and Dad really call him every month to complain about the rising electricity bill or a leaky roof and distract him? I'm doing this to protect Lucas's money, and so you and Dad can peacefully enjoy your old age." That statement completely defeated me. Protect Lucas's money. Do not bother our son. Those were fatal weak points for any parent. We could endure all the hardships in the world, but we absolutely never wanted to become a stumbling block in our children's path to success. I reached for my reading glasses, skimmed through the complicated legal jargon that I couldn't even understand a third of, and slowly picked up the pen. "You're right, Marcus. Let Lucas focus on his business. Everything at home, I leave to you." When my signature was finalized, with a stroke of blue ink on the paper, Marcus carefully gathered the documents and put them into his shiny leather briefcase. At that moment, I thought I had just built a sturdy fence to protect my family. I was wrong in life. The most terrifying robber never breaks the door down in the middle of the night. They walk right through the front door, using the key you handed them yourself, and finish you off with the warmest smile. That afternoon, I didn't just hand over control of a few bank checks. I single-handedly signed a life sentence for my own and Martha's old age. People often say old age hits like a storm, but to me, it felt like termites gnawing at a wooden house, slow, silent, until the internal structure is completely rotten. In the third year after Lucas left, my heart began to act up. The episodes of chest pain appeared with increasing frequency, draining the strength of a carpenter who used to carry heavy wooden beams without ever feeling tired. The doctor prescribed a specialized medication for me. It was expensive, but I was always reassured because my supplemental health insurance, Medicare Part D, covered it, and Marcus was managing the trust fund to pay all the bills. Until one freezing winter morning, I tremblingly opened the mailbox on the front porch. Beneath a few advertising flyers was an envelope bearing the red stamp of the insurance company. I squinted to read the bold words, "Notice of policy cancellation. Reason, failure to pay maintenance premiums for 6 consecutive months." My chest tightened, unsure if it was from my heart condition or the surging panic. Why hadn't the premiums been paid? Didn't Marcus always say he set up everything on auto pay, using the money Lucas sent? I immediately called my eldest son. On the other end of the line, Marcus's voice sounded sleepy, but quickly shifted to a chillingly calm tone. "Dad, don't panic," Marcus sighed. "Lucas's company is having major cash flow problems lately. He didn't dare tell you because he was afraid you'd worry, but he hasn't sent a dime back this month. I had to use my own pocket money to pay your electric and water bills. That insurance plan is too expensive. I paused it for a few months to balance the finances. Try to endure it for a while. Buy some over-the-counter medicine temporarily. And don't call Lucas otherwise. He might get too stressed and go bankrupt." Marcus's voice was as smooth as anesthetic injected straight into my resistance. "Lucas is struggling. He is under pressure." Those instructions shattered my last ounce of courage. I crumpled the notice in my hand, swallowing the bitter lump in my throat. I would rather die of illness than become a burden that drowned my son while he was thrashing about in the business world. But my heart couldn't lie. It needed medicine. A few days later, the meager savings I had hidden at the bottom of the cabinet were completely depleted after buying a blister pack of the specialized medication at its exorbitant retail price. That was when I made a cruel decision against myself. That night, when Martha was fast asleep, I tiptoed into the kitchen. Under the flickering fluorescent light, I placed the small white pill on the table and pulled out the utility knife I usually used for whittling wood. The hands that once carved exquisite furniture now trembled as the blade pressed down. Snap! The pill broke in half. I gathered one half into a plastic box and quickly swallowed the other half with a gulp of freezing water. From that day on, I deceived my own body with insufficient doses, just to prolong my lingering existence day by day. Every time I held half a pill in my hand, a feeling of humiliating shame churned in my stomach. Robber, an honest working man all my life, who shielded his wife and children from the wind and rain, was now like a stray dog gnawing on the mere crumbs of life. I hid it from Martha, muffled my hacking coughs into the blanket, and hid the poverty that was slowly swallowing our home. Marcus's cruelty did not stop at cutting off my lifeline. He was also a masterful director in a play called Peaceful Family. Occasionally, Lucas would video call home. At those times, Marcus was always present. He would pull me to sit in the only intact armchair left in the living room, adjusting the camera angle so it wouldn't capture the peeling, moldy walls. Smile, Dad. You look too pale. Lucas will worry, Marcus whispered in my ear before pressing the button to answer the call. On the screen, Lucas's face appeared, haggard from lack of sleep, but his eyes glowing with joy when he saw us. How are you, Mom and Dad? Marcus said your recent routine checkup went really well. Right, Lucas asked, the noise of the construction site still echoing behind him. I opened my mouth to speak, intending to scream that I was in so much pain that we had nothing left to eat except flattened packs of instant noodles. But Marcus had gently placed his heavy hand on my shoulder, squeezing it with deep implication. His eyes glanced over me, a reminder of Lucas's debts and hardships. I'm doing great, son, I spoke up, forcing my aching chest to squeeze out a smile. Everything at home is fine. Marcus takes very good care of us. Just focus on your work. Don't worry about anything. That's wonderful. I'll call back next month. I have to go to a meeting now. Lucas smiled brightly and hung up. The screen went black. Marcus patted my shoulder with a loud smack, put his phone in his pocket, and casually whistled as he walked out the door, leaving me sitting dead silent in the dark. The utility knife in my chest pocket was freezing cold. The first stab didn't pierce my body, but went straight into my dignity as a father, turning me into a lying accomplice, aiding the very person who was draining the lifeblood of my family. The piece of land behind the house wasn't just weeds and barren soil. To me, it was a legacy. It was 20 years of sweat soaking my back, exhausting overtime shifts, and worn-out safety boots I couldn't bear to replace. I used to dream of building a small carpentry workshop there, or an annex house for Lucas or Simon when they got married. It was the only valuable asset of a poor carpenter, the final piece of a father's pride. Until one autumn morning, Marcus brought a strange man to the house. He wore a cheap gray suit, but carried a black leather briefcase looking very professional, introducing himself as a notary public. Marcus spread a stack of papers on the dining table, his face as solemn as if he were about to announce a death sentence. Dad, your heart condition has been getting much worse lately, Marcus sighed, placing his broad hand on my shoulder. I've discussed this thoroughly with a lawyer. If something unfortunate happens to you, the land behind the house will get stuck in probate. In this state, inheritance tax and court fees will swallow nearly half the value of the land. Even worse, Lucas and Simon might sue each other, fighting over it. Do you want your sons to drag each other to court? My sick heart ached. Fighting over inheritance. Blood relatives tearing each other apart. No, that was the worst nightmare. I had seen so many families shattered over a few yards of land after their parents passed away. Marcus pointed to the tiny, dense legal texts on the paper. The best solution is for you to sign this paper, temporarily transferring the land into my name to bypass the law. When things settle down, I will divide it equally among my brothers. There's someone from the notary office here to bear witness. Everything is perfectly legal. What are you still worried about? Fear had clouded my reason. Fear of the government confiscating the property. Fear of my children disowning each other. Under Marcus's urging gaze and the impatient finger-tapping of the notary, I picked up the pen. The notary's embossed seal pressed down on the paper, dry and cold. The veil of deception closed perfectly. I, with my blurry vision and ignorance of the law, had no idea that the bottom document I had just signed was a quitclaim deed, a total relinquishment of ownership rights. With a scribbled pen stroke, I had permanently signed over my cherished land to a devil in the guise of my eldest son. A few months later, the truth materialized, brutal and sharp. That morning, I was awakened by the roaring of engines and the deafening crash of metal shaking the floorboards. I hastily threw on a thin shirt, coughing as I dragged my feet to the back door. The familiar old chain-link fence was gone. Instead, excavators were plowing up Martha's garden, and construction workers were erecting a towering gray, reinforced concrete wall, completely severing my 20-year-old plot of land from the house. I panicked and tremblingly dialed Marcus's number, my voice breaking with horror. "Marcus, someone is bringing excavators to destroy our land. I have to call the police right now." The other end of the line was silent for a beat. Then Marcus laughed, a bland, dry, completely unvarnished laugh. "Why call the police, Dad? It's someone else's land now. I sold it to a real estate development company last month. Cash on delivery, valid paperwork. You personally signed the quitclaim deed, transferring the rights to me in front of the notary, remember? Are you so old and senile you forgot?" The phone slipped from my hand, dropping with a thud onto the wooden floor. That dry sound was like a sledgehammer smashing straight into my eardrums. The concrete wall out there felt like it was collapsing onto my chest, crushing my lungs that were already weak due to those half pills that lacked sufficient effect. 20 years of frugality, 20 years of meatless meals, just to preserve a legacy for the next generation, ultimately brazenly swindled by the child I trusted the most. He had exploited my love and anxiety for my children to tie my hands. I clung tightly to the window frame, my trembling legs giving out. I buried my head and sobbed. Not loud tears, but the silent, choked crying of someone stripped to the absolute core of their dignity. That cold concrete wall slowly rising out, there didn't just block my view. It turned this house into a prison, locking my wife and me in a cage of betrayal, with no way out, no light, and not a single shred of hope left. The towering concrete wall behind the house was like a giant tombstone, burying not only the land but my final hopes in life. But my family's tragedy didn't stop there. There wasn't just one traitor. One afternoon, while trying to clean up a pile of rotting old newspapers under the sofa, I accidentally found an unopened envelope wedged deep in the cushions. The bank's logo on the envelope made my heart skip a beat. I tore it open with trembling hands. It was a statement for a HELOC, home equity line of credit loan. The debt amounted to $72,000, and the collateral was the very roof my wife and I were taking shelter under. The name of the guarantor for the loan was Simon, my youngest son, whom I always thought was the most gentle and content in the family. That very evening, I called Simon over. When I threw the statement on the table, the boy didn't deny it. He collapsed to the floor, hugging my scrawny legs, and wailed, "Dad, I'm sorry. I owe the casino. The gangsters threatened to chop off my hands if I didn't pay. I secretly used the house deed to take out a mortgage. I planned to hit the jackpot and redeem it right away." Simon sobbed repeatedly, his battered face smeared with tears and cowardice. I was dead silent. It turned out, while I starved and wore rags, biting my tongue to swallow half pills to save every penny, my youngest son threw the family's property deed into gambling games. "Does Marcus know about this?" I asked, my voice hoarse, my intuition pointing to a truth even more cruel. Simon shuddered, nodding tremblingly. "He found out right after I took the loan," he said. "He said if I didn't obediently stay quiet about him selling the land behind the house and taking Lucas's money, he would tell you about the deed. He said your heart condition would act up, you would die of shock, and I would become a father killer." My chest felt like someone had just twisted it. The air was suddenly drained from the room. The eldest son was a vicious wolf, and the youngest was a coward, ready to sell out his parents to save his own skin. A chest-tearing pain struck. My vision blurred. The last thing I saw before collapsing to the floor was Simon's panicked face and Martha's terrified scream. That heart attack didn't kill me, but it turned me into a true invalid. When I was discharged from the hospital and returned, the house was even colder. Medical bills piled up. We had nothing left but watery porridge. Right at that most tragic moment, Marcus appeared. He didn't bring food or medicine. He walked into the house with red eyes, disheveled hair, a perfectly staged, miserable appearance. He knelt beside the armchair where I lay gasping for air, grabbed Martha's hand, and sobbed uncontrollably. "Imam, Laura is very sick," he choked, mentioning his wife's name. "The doctor said she has a tumor. The surgery costs are out of network. I'm completely out of money. If there is no deposit, Laura will die, Mom." Martha, the woman who had endured all bitterness with me for the past 40 years, immediately shed tears. A mother's heart never questions her child's tears. She frantically comforted him and then, without hesitation, she raised her thin, wrinkled hand. She slowly took off her gold wedding ring, the only piece of jewelry she had in the world. It was the ring I had bought with my very first month's salary as a carpenter, when we had just promised each other a lifetime of weathering storms together. "Take it, my child," Martha choked up, pressing the ring into the hands of the beast in human clothing. "Take it to the pawnshop. Save your wife. Things can be bought back when they are lost, but a human life is what matters." I lay on the armchair, my throat dry, wanting to scream, wanting to reach out to stop it, but my body, paralyzed by illness, wouldn't let me move an inch. I glared at Marcus. The moment he accepted the ring, the corners of his mouth twitched slightly, a flash of smugness crossing very quickly, before being covered by a grateful bow. He had taken away the very last thing that proved the love and honor of my wife and me. 3 weeks later, Mrs. Alvarez, our kind neighbor next door, came over to give us a plate of cake. She curiously asked Martha, "Say, I saw on Facebook that Marcus's wife posted pictures of the two of them, drinking cocktails on a beach in Cancun, Mexico, looking very happy. Did Laura just win the lottery?" The plate in Martha's hand shattered on the floor. She stood frozen, her wild eyes staring at her ring finger, which had left a pale white indentation from the absence of the ring. In the dimly lit room, I closed my eyes tightly, letting 2 streams of hot tears roll down my wrinkled cheeks. Darkness had completely swallowed this house. The cruelty did not lie in poverty, but in the fact that the one stabbing us with the deepest wounds carried our own blood. We had lost everything: our land, our health, our honor, and even our faith in humanity. Unless there was a miracle, we would rot and waste away right inside our own home. The early winter days that year passed in a thick silence. In the house swallowed between the rusty fence and the concrete wall, my wife and I lived like ghosts, barely breathing and counting every faint beat of time. On a gloomy afternoon, as the cold wind howled through the cracks in the window frames that Martha had temporarily stuffed with old newspapers, I was lying curled up on the armchair, trying to soothe my aching chest. Suddenly, the roar of a truck engine sounded outside the door. It wasn't the rattling engine of the clunkers in this poor neighborhood. It was the deep rumble of a late model, expensive vehicle. Firm footsteps echoed on the rotting wooden porch. Then a knock on the door rang out, decisive and urgent. I leaned on my cane, tremblingly standing up. Martha scurried out of the kitchen, raising her hand to smooth down the sparse gray hair falling over her forehead. The creaky wooden door was pulled open. Standing there, backlit by the pale winter sun, was Lucas. My sick heart seemed to skip a beat. The skinny, tan boy holding a canvas bag at the bus stop 10 years ago had vanished. Standing before me now was a mature man in his 30s, his broad shoulders draped in a meticulously tailored wool coat. In his hand, he held a large brown envelope. His eyes sparkled with the pride of someone bringing glory home to present to his parents. But that pride lasted exactly 3 seconds. I clearly saw the moment the world in Lucas's eyes shattered. His gaze swept over the peeling door, the ceiling stained yellow from leaks, the black TV broken ages ago, and finally rested on me, a frail old man, an old dress shirt hanging loosely on raised shoulders like a coat hanger, wheezing with every breath. "Dad," Lucas called out in shock, his voice breaking. The envelope in his hand slipped, dropping with a thud onto the floor. He rushed over, embracing me, a tight, desperate, and panicked hug. When my son's sturdy arms wrapped entirely around this ruined body, a wave of self-pity surged in my veins. It had been so long since anyone had held me with such protective strength. I wanted to collapse onto his shoulder and cry, wanted to scream that I was in so much pain, that our family had lost everything my son. But a father's self-respect, the only asset I had left, stopped me from doing so. Every father wants to be a towering pine tree in the eyes of his children, not a rotting dry branch waiting to be thrown into the fireplace. I swallowed my choking tears, patted Lucas's broad back, and let out a hacking laugh, trying to act strong. Oh, this boy. Why so emotional? Coming home to visit looking like a kid. How are you, son? Lucas stepped back, his hands still gripping my shoulders tightly. He stared intently into my sunken eye sockets, then looked over at Martha, standing close by the kitchen door frame. "Mom," Lucas stepped forward, hugging Martha. He smelled the cheap medicine, the musty odor of the house, and I saw his eyes turn bloodshot. "Why is everything like this? You both are so thin. Why is the house so degraded?" "It's nothing, dear. It's just that Mom and Dad are old now. We're on a strict diet." Martha hurriedly covered up, a forced smile stretching the wrinkles on her face. His mother was always like that, spending her whole life hiding her pain, just so her children could be happy. She secretly hid the hand, missing the wedding ring behind her back, frantically continuing, "Come in, son. Sit down here. Let Mom go make some coffee." Driving a long distance must have been exhausting. Lucas sat down on the deeply sunken sofa in the middle. His eyes were like a scanner, taking in all the ruin of the room. He saw the stains on the lampshade, the newspapers stuffed in the windows, and the pale, empty space on the wall, where the oak grandfather clock I had to sell last month to pay the electric bill used to hang. I thought Marcus had arranged for workers to come fix the roof. "I sent the money," Lucas muttered, his confusion beginning to give way to suspicion. Your brother is very busy," I quickly interrupted, lying smoothly to cover up the family's misery. "His family also has a lot of things to take care of." I told him not to fix it. "It's just two old folks in the house. Why waste your money fixing it?" Martha brought out 3 cups of coffee. None were intact. One had a chipped handle, one was cracked, and one had a Christmas tree printed on it, even though it wasn't the holiday season. Lucas looked at the cups, then looked into the kitchen. The kitchen cabinet door was slightly ajar, revealing only a few cheap cans of sardines and half a bag of rice inside. "I've been sending money to Marcus every month." Lucas's voice dropped, cold and tense. "He said you were both living very well. Did you receive a single dime?" Lucas's question was like a knife slashing open the charade that Martha and I were trying to act out. The whole room fell into a dead silence. I bowed my head, staring at the scratched grain on the wooden table. The shame rose, burning my soul. I was supposed to be the one protecting him, but now I was covering up for the thief who stole his blood and sweat. I didn't know how to answer. How could I dare confess that for the past 10 years, the son I proudly entrusted with the head of the household was a blood-sucking demon? By remaining silent, we were letting Lucas understand that his sacrifices over the past decade were just an illusory joke. The silence in the living room at this moment was so thick that I felt like I was sinking to the bottom of the water, unable to breathe. Lucas looked at me, then at Martha, his gaze sweeping over the arduous wrinkles and the hidden panic on the faces of the 2 elders. Suddenly, Lucas's line of sight stopped at the small table next to the armchair. My heart skipped a beat, damn it. Rushing to open the door earlier, I had forgotten to put the daily pill organizer and the utility knife away in the drawer. Lucas stepped forward, slowly picking up the plastic box. His thumb gently ran over the compartments for the days of the week. Inside each compartment was half a white blood pressure pill, jaggedly cut. The utility knife lay right next to it, the blade still carrying a thin residue of medicinal powder. "Dad," Lucas spoke, his voice trembling so much it sounded like it was about to shatter. "What is this? Why is your medicine cut in half like this?" I tried to swallow hard, shifting in my seat, hastily reaching out to snatch the box back. The doctor said my heart is stronger lately, so the dosage was reduced, son. Just cutting it to take like this makes it last longer. My lie was so clumsy and pathetic that Lucas didn't even bother to expose it. He slammed the pillbox onto the table, turning sharply toward the kitchen. He strode to the checkered cloth that Martha had just frantically thrown over the kitchen corner. A sharp yank. The camouflage fell away, exposing the entire filthy truth we had tried to hide. A crumpled pile of papers, red-lettered disconnection warning, electric bills, and piles of hospital debt collection notices. Lucas stood frozen there, his two hands clenched into fists, the stark white knuckles trembling violently. He didn't scream. He didn't smash anything. The fury of a grown man is sometimes most terrifying in its stillness. He reached into his wool coat pocket, pulled out his smartphone, tapped a few times, and walked closer to me. He placed the brightly lit phone on the table, right next to the half pill and the utility knife. "Dad, Mom." Look, Lucas's voice was ice cold, but his eye sockets were bloodshot. I tremblingly put on my reading glasses, leaning in to look at the screen. It was a banking app. On the screen was a long list of transfer history, going all the way back 10 years. All of them shared a single recipient, Marcus. The numbers caught my eye, clear and cruel. The early years were $300, $500. In the later years, as Lucas became successful, the numbers rose to $1,000, $2,000, sometimes $3,000 a month. But what pained me the most wasn't those massive numbers. What left me dead silent were the tiny notes under each transaction. Send to Marcus to buy the best heart medicine for Dad. Money to fix the roof before winter for Mom. Buy some good food. Don't let Mom and Dad eat canned food anymore. Dad's birthday present. Take Mom and Dad to a restaurant for me, brother. My eyes blurred. Over $90,000 in the span of 10 years. Every single penny was drenched in sweat tears and the boundless love of a son far from home. "I never forgot you, Mom and Dad." Lucas choked up, a teardrop seeping from the corner of his eye, rolling down his suntanned cheek. "I sent money every month. I worked 16 hours a day, ate boxed meals on the scaffolding, slept in my truck because I was afraid of wasting rent money. I just wanted you both to live with your heads held high. Why? Why did he tell me you were living so comfortably? Why did he tell you that I was struggling and drowning in debt?" The world around me seemed to collapse. The worldview I had tried to cling to for 10 years shattered into sharp fragments, piercing straight into my heart. It turned out, Lucas was not heartless. He never considered us a burden. He had never been under so much pressure that his finances were depleted. It was all a horrifying play directed single-handedly by Marcus. He played the role of a tolerant eldest brother, soothing me with lies, so I would voluntarily sign the trust fund papers. He stood behind me, squeezing my shoulder during video calls, forcing me to play the role of a happy old man, so Lucas would keep sending money home. He pushed me into destitution, stripping his parents of everything from medicine to food, while wildly squandering his younger brother's blood and sweat. Martha covered her face and sobbed, sliding down to collapse beside the table leg. She cried for the son standing before her, cried for our own foolishness. I reached out and touched the phone screen, swiping over Lucas's notes. My fingertips were freezing. The humiliation and self-pity I had felt for so long suddenly vanished, giving way to a different emotion, more primal and far more intense: fury. I had been a father the wrong way. I had tolerated evil breeding right under my own roof, because I was too cowardly and gullible. I looked up at Lucas, looking into his blazing eyes. For the first time in 10 years, the small back silhouette at the bus stop that day had truly become an ancient tree. "Lucas," I whispered, my voice hoarse but no longer trembling. I grabbed my son's large, calloused hand. "You've cried enough, my son. Now tell me, what must we do to get everything back?" That night, our house did not fall asleep. But unlike the thousands of previous nights that were always thick with despair and sighs, the air tonight carried a completely different weight. It was the stillness before a massive storm, the stillness of a counterattack. Lucas didn't sleep a wink. He took off his expensive wool coat, rolled up his white dress shirt sleeves past his elbows, and turned the family's old, chipped dining table into a veritable war room. I sat on the armchair, a thin blanket wrapped around my shoulders, silently observing my son. Under the pale light of the fluorescent lamp and the glow radiating from the laptop screen, Lucas's face revealed sharp, cold, and iron-hard features. He didn't yell, he didn't smash furniture, nor did he demand to grab a bat and go find Marcus to settle the score. His fury didn't erupt into a devastating fire, but condensed into an ice-sharp blade. "Mom," Lucas called softly, his eyes never leaving the screen. "Bring me everything you have. Unpaid bills, Dad's medical records, insurance cancellation notices, everything." Martha rummaged through the old tin box, where she hid her unnamed pains over the past decade, and placed a stack of yellowed papers on the table. Lucas carefully used his phone to photograph every single page. He took close-up shots of the plastic box containing my half-blood pressure pills. He downloaded the entire statement from his bank, time-stamped it, and saved it in multiple backups on the cloud. All of Marcus's lies, all of his embezzlement tricks, were being nailed to a board of undeniable evidence. About the land behind the house, Lucas suddenly spoke up, his fingers typing swiftly on the keyboard. "Dad, tell me the details again. How did he do it?" I swallowed hard, recounting the day Marcus brought the notary over, about the fear of inheritance tax, and how I put pen to paper on what I believed was establishing a trust fund. Lucas didn't reply. He accessed the county recorder's portal, typing in our home address. Just a few minutes later, a digital copy of the quitclaim deed appeared on the screen. He turned the laptop screen toward me, zooming in on the final section of the paper. "Dad, put on your glasses and look closely at this signature," Lucas said, his voice deep. I leaned forward. My name, Robert Harper, was signed with a stroke of blue ink. But the moment I saw it, a jolt of electricity ran down my spine. "That's not my handwriting," I whispered, my heart rate suddenly spiking. "I've had rheumatoid arthritis for 10 years. My finger joints are swollen. Even holding chopsticks is hard. My signature is always shaky, and the letter R is always broken. But this signature on the screen, it's too smooth, too firm." Lucas smirked, a half-smile filled with absolute contempt for someone who shared his blood. "He tricked you. The paper you signed in front of the notary that day might have just been a scratch paper, or a forged part of the trust fund. To file a valid land transfer record with the government, he needed both your and Mom's signatures on the same document. He knew Mom would be suspicious and didn't dare force her to sign. Instead, he personally forged both of your signatures." Forging signatures. Property fraud. Martha covered her mouth, her whole body trembling. "That means going to prison, my son." That's right, Mom. Lucas closed the laptop with a dry clack. He looked up at us, his eyes glowing like a wild wolf's in the night. This is no longer a family dispute. It's a felony, and I will make him pay for every single penny, every single teardrop of yours. Looking at Lucas right now, a fierce sense of pride surged through my veins, sweeping away all the humiliation and defeatism. The boy I had seen off at the bus stop had now become a true alpha wolf. He wasn't using the physical violence of a low-life thug. He was using his intellect, using systematic arrangement, using the very laws of America, which Marcus thought he could exploit to corner us to death, as a weapon to deal a fatal blow. Lucas was exactly like how I used to do carpentry, measuring carefully, cutting precisely, not a single wasted motion, and when hammering a nail, driving it so deep it could never be pulled out. The dim morning light began to reflect through the window frame. Our family's longest night had ended. Lucas stood up, putting his wool coat back on. He stepped forward, placed a hand on my shoulder, his eyes resolute. The financial and land evidence is done, but we still need a testimony to prove the entire extortion plot and the inside complicity, Lucas said, directing his gaze toward the door. Now, we go find the final piece of the puzzle. We go find Simon. Lucas's truck had barely left for 2 hours when it returned. The tires crunched on the gravel in front of the porch. When the door opened, the freezing morning wind rushed in, carrying a dilapidated, lowly silhouette. That was Simon. My youngest son was wearing mechanic's overalls covered in grease from the auto repair shop, his beard stubbly, looking haggard like a ghost. He didn't dare look up at me or Martha. He took heavy steps, as if wearing shackles on his feet, coldly escorted into the living room by Lucas. As soon as he reached the middle of the house, Simon's legs gave out. He dropped to his knees, collapsing right in front of my shoes. "Dad." "Mom," Simon sobbed, his shoulders shaking violently. "I am a bastard. I'm sorry." Lucas stepped forward, tossing a stack of printed documents and a USB drive onto the table, right next to the pile of bills in my half-pill. He crossed his arms over his chest, his voice razor-sharp. "Confess everything, Simon. Don't make me speak for you." Simon looked up at me, his eyes bloodshot, swollen from fear and humiliation. He began to speak, each word seeping out like pus from a wound that had festered for too long. The truth was even more cruel than what Lucas and I had guessed last night. Marcus didn't merely use Simon's debt to threaten him. He had turned his younger brother's mistake into a perfect extortion tool. The day I secretly mortgaged this house to get the HELOC loan to pay my casino debt, Marcus intercepted the bank documents, Simon said tremblingly, tears cascading down onto the chipped wooden floor. He called me out to a coffee shop. He threw the paper in my face and said, "Do you know Dad's heart condition is very bad lately? If I show this paper to the old man, he'll die of shock right on the spot. You will be a father killer." My heart tightened. Marcus had used my very life to blackmail his own brother. "What did he force you to do?" I asked, my voice dropping, thick with fury. "He forced me to be a witness for the quitclaim deed." Simon buried his head and sobbed. "The notary that day was his friend. They swapped the papers so you would sign a draft. Then, Marcus personally forged your and Mom's signatures on the original and forced me to sign the witness section. He promised to give me 30% of the land sale money to pay off the gangsters. If I didn't do it, he would expose that I mortgaged the house, and you would die." Martha let out a scream of terror, staggering backward. Lucas caught his mother in time, his eyes looking like they wanted to incinerate everything. "But he didn't pay you a single cent, right?" Lucas asked coldly. Simon smiled bitterly, a pathetic smile. "He sold the land for $300,000. But then he blocked my number. When I went straight to his company, he threw $10,000 at me and said, "Take this to survive. If you utter half a word, I will send you to prison for complicity in document forgery." I was a coward. I was afraid of going to prison. I was afraid the gangsters would chop off my hands. I was afraid Dad would die. So I stayed silent and watched him drain every penny you sent home. Saying that, Simon pushed the stack of papers and the USB drive toward me. In here are photos of all the text messages where he threatened me, an audio recording of him admitting he forged Mom's signature, and the transaction proof for the land sale. Lucas said, "As long as I submit these to the court, he won't be able to deny it. I am ready to go to prison, Dad. Please forgive me." I looked at my youngest son, lying prostrate at my feet. The anger inside me suddenly shattered, giving way to a profound sorrow. In life, cowardice is a sin, but the one who exploits someone else's cowardice to commit evil is the true demon. Marcus had thoroughly studied every weak point of this family. My pride, his mother's love, Lucas's busyness, and Simon's cowardice. He turned this family into a chessboard, and he ruthlessly sacrificed all of us to get rich. I slowly bent down, my hands, heavily calloused from sawdust and years, touched Simon's messy hair. The boy flinched, looking up at me with eyes of disbelief. "Dad." "Stand up, my son," I whispered, trying to stop the aged tears from falling. "You were wrong, very wrong. But you bravely stepped into the light to fix it. I can forgive your weakness, but I will absolutely show no mercy to the malice of the one who pushed you into that dead end." Lucas nodded, his eyes shining with agreement. He knew I had made a father's decision, to protect the erring children who know how to turn back, and to suitably punish the one who trampled on his own flesh and blood. "Tonight is Sunday," Lucas said, looking at his watch. "According to the schedule, he will drop by here playing the filial son, bringing a cheap basket of fruit to check if Mom and Dad have starved to death yet." He pulled out his phone, dialed a number, his tone shifting to the professional and cold demeanor of a CEO. "Attorney Ellis, it's me, Lucas Harper." "That's right, the evidence has been fully gathered. We also have the witness testimony. Prepare the civil lawsuit to freeze the assets and the criminal fraud complaint. Yes, we will flip the table tonight." Lucas put the phone down on the table. He looked at me, then looked at the wooden door, shivering from the cold wind. The trap was perfectly set. Now, we just had to wait for the bloodthirsty beast to walk right in. At 7 in the evening, the familiar engine sound echoed on the porch. The front door opened, accompanied by a blast of cold wind and Marcus's deep, sickeningly pious voice. "Mom, Dad, I brought some fruit and bread for you too." Marcus strode into the living room, a perfect smile fixed on his lips. But that smile instantly froze when he saw the scene inside. There was no dim darkness. There was no frail old man groaning on the armchair. Under the bright fluorescent lights, I sat with my back straight at the head of the dining table, the position of the patriarch that I had given up for many years. Martha sat to my left, her eye sockets red but her head held high with pride. On my right was Lucas, hands intertwined, his eyes as sharp as a razor, staring intently at the man who had just walked in. And in the dark corner by the kitchen door, Simon stood with his head bowed, his hands clenched tight. "Lucas, when did you get back?" Marcus paused for a beat, but the instincts of a professional con artist helped him regain his composure very quickly. He let out a hearty laugh, stepping forward, intending to pat Lucas's shoulder. "Good heavens, why didn't you call me to pick you up at the airport? Is your business doing well lately?" Lucas didn't budge. He just jutted his chin toward the thick stack of documents sitting dead center on the dining table. "Fine, very fine, Marcus. Fine enough for me to hire one of the most expensive criminal defense attorneys in this state to investigate exactly whose pocket the $96,000 I sent home over the past 10 years flowed into. Marcus's hand froze in midair. His face paled for a fraction of a second, but the eldest brother label was still pulled out as his last shield. He turned to me, furrowing his brow, looking aggrieved. "Dad, what is Lucas talking about? The money. I used it to cover living expenses, your medicine, and taking care of the house. Lucas, you've been away from home too long. You don't understand how inflation is these days. Did you use $96,000 to make my dad cut his blood pressure pill in half every day?" Lucas interrupted, his voice not loud but hissing through his teeth. He tossed the plastic box containing the half pills into the middle of the table. "Did you use my money to starve my mother, let the house rot, and then tell them I was drowning in debt?" Marcus took a step back, swallowing hard. His eyes darted around, desperately looking for support. But when his gaze met Simon in the corner of the room, he knew his fortress of lies had collapsed. "You," Marcus hissed through his teeth, glaring at Simon. "What did you tell them? You gambling addict. Do you think you're so clean, Dad? Simon mortgaged this house to go gamble. He is a scumbag." "Shut you, P." I slammed my bony hand onto the table. The deafening smack echoed through the room, cutting off Marcus's screaming. For the first time in 10 years, I wielded a father's authority again to roar at my eldest son. My chest throbbed with pain, but the strength from my fury overpowered it all. I leaned on my cane, slowly stood up straight, drawing myself up as tall as possible. "Stop acting, Marcus. I know everything." I gritted out every word, staring straight into the eyes of the one who had drained the lifeblood of this family. "I know you blackmailed your brother. I know you tricked me into signing the land transfer deed, then forged your mother's signature to sell the 20 years of my blood, sweat, and tears. And the most painful of all," I choked up, turning to hold Martha's bony, empty hand. "You deceived your mother's love, took her wedding ring just to get money to go travel. Marcus, what on earth is your heart made of?" The pressure from all sides, along with the blatant evidence on the table, stripped Marcus of his fake pious facade. The mask fell off, exposing the selfish and malicious true nature of a sophist. "Do you think I wanted this?" Marcus screamed, throwing his arms toward Lucas. "He has a company. He has a career. And what about me? You two only ever took pride in him. I am the eldest. I had to look after this house. I needed business capital too. I only took the share I was supposed to get. That land was going to be divided to me eventually anyway." Slap. A slap landed right on Marcus's face. Not from Lucas, but from me. My hand burned, my whole body trembling from a swing that used all the remaining strength of a sick old man. Marcus's head jerked to the side. He held his cheek, staring at me in shock. "The share you were supposed to get." I laughed bitterly, tears welling up. "What you were supposed to get was a father's absolute trust. What you were supposed to get was your parents' pride when entrusting this entire family to you. But you trampled all over it." Lucas stepped forward, placing a file stamped by the law firm onto the table. "Tomorrow morning, the lawsuit will be filed. The land you just sold will be under an emergency freeze because the documents have forged signatures. The criminal financial fraud file has also been sent to the police," Lucas said, as cold as a judge reading a sentence. "You have two choices. Either prepare money to hire a lawyer for court and face prison time, or get the hell out of here and pray to God that I have enough pity not to strip you of everything." Marcus looked at the file, his face as pale as a sheet of paper. He turned to me, dropping to his knees, trying to cling to my pant leg. His despicable survival instinct surged again. "Dad, save me. Tell Lucas to stop. I am your flesh and blood." I looked down at the person crying at my feet. There was not a shred of pity left. My heart had turned to stone the moment I learned the truth about the half pill in Martha's ring. The Harper family does not have a son named Marcus. I pulled my leg back, coldly turning my face away. My son, named Marcus, died the day he took off his mother's wedding ring to pawn it. Get out of my house before I call the police. Marcus stood dazed. He looked at me, looked at Martha, who was turning away shedding tears, looked at Lucas's indifference and Simon's contempt. Knowing it was beyond salvation, he staggered to his feet, slowly backed out to the door, and disappeared into the cold night. The door closed. The house was finally cleansed of the evil aura that had suffocated us for a decade. Exhausted, I collapsed into my chair, closing my eyes. A brutal battle had passed, and these bleeding wounds would take a very long time to heal. But at least tonight, my family could breathe the air of truth again. The days following that fateful Sunday night unfolded like a tornado of paperwork legalities and naked truths. The lawyer Lucas hired was absolutely ruthless. The evidence of signature forgery, combined with Simon's confession, created an unbreakable legal lever. The sale transaction of the land behind the house was immediately subjected to an emergency freeze by the court. The dirty notary had his license revoked and faced severe penalties. As for Marcus, the eldest son who once acted so pious in his shiny suits, he now had to spend his day dealing with financial crime investigators. He tried to call and beg me to withdraw the complaint, pleading to our blood ties, but I had changed my phone number. There are wounds that time can heal, but there are betrayals that demand the price of the law's most just punishment. As for Simon, the boy did not hide. He honestly confessed the whole truth to the investigators, accepting a suspended sentence for complicity in gambling. Simon still worked at the auto repair shop, taking on extra night shifts to grind and pay off the bank loan he had secretly used the house to secure. Every weekend, he came to visit us, not daring to step inside, but only standing outside the window, cleaning up piles of debris or fixing the water pipes. I did not rush to embrace him as if nothing had happened, but I left the door open. Forgiveness takes time, and Simon was using his honest sweat to atone for his mistakes. We didn't stay in that old, decaying house anymore. The very next week, Lucas personally packed our few memorabilia and took Martha and me away. The car rolled away, leaving behind the gray concrete wall and the dried, dead garden. I didn't look back. That place used to be a home, but for the past 10 years, it had turned into a grave that buried our old age alive. Our destination was a high-end apartment located in a quiet, sunlit suburb. For the first time stepping through the sturdy oak door, I smelled the scent of life. No more musty odors, no more cracks howling with the north wind. The apartment had a spacious living room, a warm heating system, and a beautiful little balcony, where Lucas had thoughtfully placed a few pots of velvet roses for Martha to tend to herself. This morning, the first winter sun rays shone through the large glass window, illuminating every tiny dust particle dancing in the air. I sat on the soft velvet armchair, enjoying the comfort that this old body hadn't felt in a very long time. Martha walked out of the kitchen, a radiant smile blooming on her lips. She placed a glass of warm water and the familiar pill organizer in front of me. I slowly opened today's compartment. Inside, there was no longer a jagged, sharp fragment cut from misery and despair. Resting peacefully, there was a whole, perfectly round, pristine white pill. I put the pill in my mouth, drinking the glass of water. The water slid down my throat, bringing a vigorous life force to irrigate my scarred heart. Lucas walked out of the bedroom, holding a small red velvet box in his hand. He walked over to his mother, taking one knee on the floor. "Mom," Lucas smiled, opening the lid. Inside was a brand new gold ring, sparkling under the sun. I couldn't find the old ring at the pawn shop. They already melted it down. But I want you to wear this ring. It's not your and Dad's keepsake from 40 years ago, but it is a promise of today. From now on, no one will ever be able to strip anything away from you and Dad again. Martha shed tears, tears of absolute fulfillment. She reached out her thin hand. Lucas carefully slipped the ring onto his mother's ring finger, covering the pale, empty indentation that had been there for so long. I sat there, watching my wife and son, feeling a strange, profound peace enveloping my entire mind. Having spent half my life exhausting my strength to raise my children, I once naively thought that blood ties were the strongest shield. But the dark 10 years that passed taught me a costly lesson. Blood doesn't naturally make a family. It is sincerity, sacrifice, and the courage to stand up and protect each other when the storm hits. The one with the surname Harper pushed me to my death, but it was also another person with the surname Harper who used his broad back to pull me toward the sun. I reached out, holding Martha's hand wearing the new ring, and placed my other hand on Lucas's shoulder. The brilliant sunlight rested on the shoulders of the three of us. A new day, a new life, had finally truly begun. Epilogue: The Heartwood and the Scars. As a carpenter, I spent my whole life carving wooden planks, using squares and hammers to build countless roofs. I used to naively believe that as long as the foundation was deep enough and the pillars strong enough, all the storms in the world would be left outside the door. But I was wrong. The most brutal storm doesn't come from the gray sky out there. It sprouts from the heartwood that has silently rotted inside the walls. I have 3 sons. One used his parents' tolerance to weave a noose. One stood and watched his parents slowly suffocate out of his own cowardice. And one, the son I pushed out into the world with empty hands, was the only one who came back, using his shoulders to prop up an entire collapsing family. If anyone asks me, do I hate Marcus? Resentment is like a wood splinter lodged deep in your flesh, immensely painful and agonizing, but now I have chosen to pull that splinter out. Not because I am noble, but because that person no longer deserves to occupy any space in my mind. The most brutal punishment for a blood traitor is not hatred, but eternal oblivion. The scars of 10 years living in poverty, struggle, and deception are still there. But every morning I wake up, seeing the whole pill on the table, seeing Martha's gentle smile and Lucas's resolute eyes, I know those scars are the proudest proof that we survived. Flesh and blood might give us a bond from the moment we cry coming into the world. But to truly be called a family, people need much more than that. It is compassion, the sacrifice to bite the bullet and endure, and the courage to step into the light to protect the ones you love when the storm comes. Sunset is gradually falling on the sunlit balcony of the new apartment. I gently squeeze my wife's hand, wearing the sparkling gold ring, smiling and closing my eyes. The rest of this Robert Harper's life finally has no hidden corners where darkness can lurk. Because after all that tragedy, I have truly understood one thing. A sturdy home has never been made of concrete walls or lifeless plots of land. A true home is the people who absolutely refuse to let you fall.